along with a number of you, we've been struggling with this issue of what is happening to the building in which we're all sitting right now. And it's been an interesting journey because when we started, we really were just looking for information. What's happening? What are the decisions being made about the future of the North End Community Center? Obviously, this has become too small for our vibrant community. It desperately needs updating. We could see I couldn't even use my PowerPoint here tonight. So I think most of us are on the same page about the need of this community for more and better facilities. And I want to say, first of all, I don't know anybody in our coalition who doesn't agree with that. We all think that the city needs to do more for our community, and we're glad the city's thinking about it. Now, one of the things we're hoping to tonight is to answer your questions, because there's been some misinformation, and we'd like to be here to answer them. And also, we are seeking NEWRA's official support for our landmarks petition. So I want you to consider that, obviously, as we go forward. And it turns out that Kirsten, who lives on Stillman Street, is a landmarks commissioner. So she's been extremely helpful in advising us. And I must say, Maria, where are you? Maria and Kirsten and I and John, my husband, were all up at very early this morning because I gave a much longer presentation to the Boston Society of Architects. And they're also very helpful in helping us understand what is the importance of this building. So let me be very brief. Why is this building so special, and what is the controversy about? Well, many of you who grew up here know why this building is so special. But as Boston prepares to celebrate its 400th anniversary, some of us are thinking about the oldest neighborhood in the city, the North End. And it's not just about the colonial period and the Revolution. God love those periods. It's about the last great immigrant wave as well. This is a very important all-American story. And I know I'm proud of my Swedish grandmother who came over in the hold of a ship, just like many of your relatives who came from Ireland and Italy and Eastern Europe. So we share that narrative. And what is it about the North End? Well, we carry that culture, and that's why some of us have moved here and are very happy to be here. Not all of us were lucky enough to have been born here. I see some natives. You're the lucky ones, but we're happy to live nearby. Some of us live very near here. I live right across the street. So what is it about this building? Instead of building a wall to keep out these immigrants, the progressive era politicians at the turn of the 20th century said, let's build some bathhouses that will help lift them up and solve some of the unsanitary conditions in all the tenements that we know were being thrown up overnight, not only in the North End, but Philadelphia and also New York. So this is a national story. It's not just a local story. And so the bathhouses, there was something called the bathhouse movement. And there's actually a book about this. I'm happy to share it with you. And it turns out that it came right after people started to believe that germs caused diseases. It came right after a cholera epidemic. So there was a lot of concern about public health. But at the same time, these politicians back in about 1902 wanted the public baths to bridge the gap between the classes and help achieve a small measure of social justice. And they extolled cleanliness as one of the hallmarks of civilization and progress. So they had a lot hanging on whether they built these bathhouses or not. So we're sitting here now in one of the last remaining well-preserved monuments to that earlier immigrant era. This quite famous, actually, North Bennett Street bathhouse and gymnasium. Kirsten has been very patient. The land was taken in 1902. This is what the North End looked like then. And we all recognize this is the playground. It was called the North End Playground. And the bathhouse is right here on the northwest corner. And it was commissioned by a very famous man, John F. Kennedy's grandfather, Honey Fitz. And this was his home ward, as most of you know. So it was important that they picked a really good architect for this and that it become a very majestic important building because it was going to be in the mayor's home district. In 1910, I'm sorry, you don't need to in 1910, when it finally opened, there were a few financial delays. It was celebrated in many books, and even today, it appears in architecture and history books. So it's an important structure. This is not just a random building in our neighborhood. And many of us see it and its design as an element that keeps the North End looking like the little Italy that it's famous for being, because it's got that red brick that's in a lot of northern Italy towns, and that architects have celebrated about the North End architecture. So let me cut to the chase. So what else about this building before we get to the controversy? Well, it was designed after the Villa Medici in Rome, believe it or not. And its entrance, if you probably don't notice it when you come in and out, but it's on a piazza, which is the Volcari playground, just the way the villas in Rome were. And so the playground is also part of what we're trying to save. So you all know that Tony DeMarco started, and some of you know him personally, right? He started his career working out here. The building has been used, it was used actually up until 1976 when it closed officially as a bathhouse. It was used, according to city records, as by over 900 North End residents regularly. And in 1985, we all know it was restored and repurposed as the Nazzaro Community Center, which is what it is today. Now, look, the building today needs repairs. We understand that. But it's hard to miss the irony of the challenge to this building, that it's being considered, not decided, for possible sale to finance the new North End Community Center in another location. And the reason this is ironic is it bears the Nazzaro name. Michael Nazzaro Sr., for whom it was named, had a son named Michael Nazzaro Jr., who knew him personally. Some of you, yes, I thought so. You all know he was a state rep who is credited, among others, I'm sure, the Longonis and others, but to saving the North End from eminent domain and destruction by the Boston Redevelopment Authority. He's, as we all know, he stepped up and he rescued a lot of the buildings here. So to have the Nazzaro building bear his family name is ironic if that ends up being taken and sold for private development. We just think that's a little rich. In 2004, you may remember our only Italian-American mayor, Tom Menino, fixed it up for $1 million. So the playground and community have been in public use for over 100 years. So what's all the fuss about? Well, we were frustrated trying to find out what actually were the plans for this building. And the process to us was not as transparent as we expected. It was only when we went to the Landmarks Commission to try to discuss with the staff there, how do we protect this gorgeous building, that we found out it had been put on a list by the city of Boston. I think it's called the Housing Innovation Lab. I have it in my computer. And it was on a list that they were inviting developers to create proposals to use certain public buildings for housing.
Ellen, it was a request for information.
It's called a request for information.
So there were 80 different city-owned land parcels and buildings, including fire stations, police stations, municipal lots. And this was a request for information based only. There was no actual proposals being solicited at that time.
Why don't
just
we let her finish making her presentation and perhaps...
I'm also glad to have the clarification. I'm very glad. Yes, for me, a request for information, I understand that's important.
It's different than an RFP.
Okay,
we do
it wasn't an RFP, but it was to those of us in the community who aren't experts on this, including me. Especially.
Well, it says at the bottom of the RFI, it says this is for informational purposes only, and no actual proposals will be solicited.
What the message that was sent by that particular thing that was flagged by the Landmark staff themselves was they said, do you know that it's on this list? And the list is of public buildings, and they were asking for ideas on how to use these buildings to create housing. That was what this request for information was. Now, this was surprising to me. I had not heard this. Also on the list just for this early request for information, sure, but it's still a list of buildings the city wants to consider for housing, is the North End Public Library branch. It's on the list. It doesn't, again, Marie has made it clear, this is not a request for proposals, but it is a request for information. In other words, the city will consider proposals or ideas or whatever information from people who would like to step up and propose housing for these buildings. So this was, first of all, as amateurs, we don't know the levels of requests to this. To us, this was a surprising thing. Secondly, when we had the October 17 meeting, I think many of you were there with the Sasaki architects who were describing the possible new sites for the North End Community Center. They suggested, they acknowledged that the city actually received a commercial real estate estimate if they sold this building, for the sale of this building. So they got an estimate on the value of this building for commercial real estate purposes. That was a second bit of evidence that was not comforting for those of us who would rather not sell the building to the private use. The third thing that was happening, and I don't know if any of you shared this experience, I know some of you were there with me on election day, was we were hearing from people close to the city, close to the process, that a deal was in the works to sell this building to make the money to buy the new community center, and that it was going to be the old versus the new. You couldn't have both. And in an op-ed that a controversial op-ed, I might say, that we put together and it appeared in Matt Conti's blog, I was recounting how certain people had said to me on election day, it's a pile of bricks, and it's saying it had to be torn down or just sold or whatever. They didn't care as long as we had our new, beautiful new community center. So again, we are going to our officials and so forth. I have to say this morning, Maria gave me a great sense of optimism, because I think you said, I'd like you to tell me if this is right, that there's been no decision to sell this building and no developer has been picked, for example, so that we are in the early stages of decisions about the building. And I couldn't be more delighted, and I want to thank you for giving us that reassurance, because this is the first time we have heard, and we've been asking a lot of questions of officials, it's the first time we've heard any official close to the mayor's office saying that. So thank you, that's very reassuring. On the other hand, we are told by people who understand how development occurs that this is the time to get the landmarks petition, not when it's already decided, but when the community still has options. So I know I'm taking too long, I'll try to cut it short. So what have we put together here? Kirsten and Marie and many of you in this room have been laboring to get a petition going that would protect the outside of the building only. It could still be sold for condos, the city could still use that money to develop the new center. It just protects the beautiful exterior. That's what a landmarks petition does. The inside has already been redeveloped, so we aren't landmarking that. You can fix it up, you can do whatever you need to inside. It's just the outside. That's the landmarks petition. And we, on our first day, many of you were there, some of you signed it, in the pouring rain outside this voting area, we got something like over 700 signatures. That was astounding to us. And they were all registered Boston voters because they were coming in and out of voting. So that was a real good showing. Then we went to the Landmarks Commission, and Kirsten had to learn this at the same time we did because she's a commissioner, not a staffer. They said, oh, we can't process all these signatures. Are you kidding us? We have a stack. I have them here. And we're presenting packets of them to our public elected officials. We said, what do you mean you can't process them? And they said, well, you know, we can process 15 official signatures. So what we did then was, we're still working with the Landmarks Commission to get an acceptable petition. They've been very nice, they've been great, and Kirsten especially has been awesome. But at the same time, we said, look, if we can't get any more signatures, we're losing momentum. We've got to get the neighborhood organized. So what we did was we started a second petition, which is different. And that's on change.org. It's on our website, which is very simple, SaveTheNazzaro.org. And oh, we have postcards for anybody who can't remember Save the Nazzaro Center. Please take a postcard. And what we're doing with that is we're simply saying, keep this beautiful building for public use. It's in the heart of the North End. Use it or lose it. If you sell it for private use, which, you know, all these buildings have been, and some of us live in them, but if you sell this last building for private use, then you won't have your public in the heart of the North End, your public resources that we've had before. So our view, and I don't want to speak for everyone in our coalition, but I think it's pretty universal that we appreciate the fact that overnight practically our Change.org petition has gotten another 400 signatures. So we're now at over 1,000 signatures, and these are people who care about this, who want to have a new basketball court and new facilities somewhere else. That's good, but they don't want to have to sell the crown jewels of our legacy and our heart of our community to buy it. They think the city should come up with other money to put that together. So I think I've summarized that pretty well. Does anybody want to add anything or have any questions to ask?
Well, I could just, if I could add, Matt Conti's blog also has a petition online, correct?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was under one of your articles.
Good, okay, yeah.
You mentioned that they keep saying that it's either or and that you can't have both. Whatever happened to the fact that a developer could be told you can build the new and the linkages, you keep this?
That sounds great. I mean, we're open to whatever is going on. We're hoping that the public will step in and have their voices heard. I don't remember ever being asked in a public meeting, are you willing to give up the old to get the new? We've been told there are 3 possible sites. This is one of them, but they would tear down the modern building, the old building, to build a modern one. And they would also put it on over the Polcari playground, using that up, and it would still be too small. So that didn't seem to be a very good option. The other 2 options we were told were both on the waterfront. So we're hoping that like Charlestown, like Beacon Hill, like East Boston, we'll have more locations for multiple programs. Why does it all have to be in one building? It didn't used to be, right?
No.
Didn't used to be. So anyway, any kind of good solution we're very eager to hear about and be part of. Good ideas, yeah. Anybody else?
What's it mean by being a landmark?
What does that mean?
Good question.
Yeah, so designation as a Boston landmark is really the highest level of honor and protection a historic resource in the city of Boston can have. It's actually, there aren't very many. They're listed on the Boston Landmarks website, but that designation will prevent any external changes to that building. There can be other areas that are designated as part of a Boston landmark as well. So for example, here, the proposal would include the Polcari playground because that's sort of part of the same complex. You know, it's the highest level of protection. It's really the only real protection in the city of Boston right now a historic resource can have that will actually prevent it from being changed externally, torn down. Internal portions of a building can be part of the landmark designation as well. But that's much rarer than just the external.
I think what we're trying to do after this is try to have a community meeting like we did with the nursing home. Get everybody involved to understand what this is really all about. I mean, I understand that they want a basketball court with seats so people can come to the game. Well then, I suggest, maybe I'm wrong the way I feel, but you can build another basketball court with seating so parents can go to the game. You could have a gymnasium, but over here you can utilize the space. That top floor has a big basketball court. You could make 3 rooms out of that. You could do a daycare. You could do like an activity for the children. You could get more kids in here. If we could get somebody to redesign this, I think it would be fantastic. I know it's about money, but it's about keeping it. That's all all we want to do. We don't want to take it away from anybody. We want to keep it so we can get more children in here. Remember we had the North End School, Union, we went to cooking school, North Bennett School, we went to dances, CC, we had roller skate, we had basketball, we had theater night. What do these kids have today?
Nothing.
What do they have? The new tobacco shop.
Yeah, the vaping shop.
The new tobacco. They have nothing. That's all they have. That's all I'm saying. Give the elderly their space and give the children something. Out of order.
No, you're not.
You're not.
I have a point of view for seniors, being one.
They're not alone.
We are too.
I hope that the emphasis is universal and not only for children. This is a nice space. There's plenty of room. You can sneak a few things that seniors do. They're not quite as active. They probably wouldn't need a basketball court, but a room to play cards, a room to do other senior-related activities, I think would be attractive to the group of people that are seniors.
She talked about a dome for seniors to sit
Yeah,
outside.
in other words, if they want to redesign this to utilize it for children or whatever, that back where people sit and have cookouts and parties, they could put a dome over that and clean it all up so the elderly can go out there and have lunch. They can have their cookouts, they can have parties for the children. I mean, there is so much they can do with this center. And maybe they don't need, say hypothetically they want to go on Fulton Street. They may not need all that property to put a basketball court or a gym. We don't need an outdoor pool.
We already
We have
have
that pool. We
We
give
could
up
dome
that
that
pool,
too.
you're gonna have high-rise apartments.
I agree.
Okay, so all I'm saying is, we're trying to save this building, fix it up, utilize it, put your basketball court down there, leave this basketball, this court for the young teens that can come in here and play. That's all I'm saying.
You know, there's a full-size basketball court right across the street. The Coast Guard base. I walk by there a lot.
I mean, that,
They really use that thing, and most of the time they're out at sea. But I mean, if the people that are involved with the youth to play basketball coordinated something with the captain down there, because he's very favorable to the North End, maybe they could get some time in a full-size gym down there.
yeah.
Because
We're not
I
allowed
can play
to.
ball up here in this gym. You learn a lot playing in a small gym.
You know, if they decide to build a gym, they can they can get a fee for that.
Right.
You know, it's just like they do a beacon down here. There's a fee, and it's donated to the Nazzaro Center. So whatever money there is, could be for the children, or give a party to the elderly. These kids like to go on ski trip. You could have movie night. There's so much you could do with this center if you can get the right people to, maybe I'm Phil?
Particularly agree with your plan, but my question is, all this renovation you want to do in here will close this building for a year or two. What happens to the existing programs?
Well, if they sell it, it'll be closed forever. That's our alternative.
I said if your plan goes through
Yeah.
and you want this place renovated, this place will have to close for at least a year, 2 years. That's what we've been told, it's not necessarily. We've been told by the architects and the city of Boston, it will be closed. So what do you do with these programs?
They're doing it one floor at a time, they could do the same thing.
They can't. Not construction, they're gonna
Bill,
rebuild
if
it.
that's a real question, the real answer is, there's nothing that says you couldn't build a new building, leaving this open while that's being built. Put the programs there while this is being refurbished. I mean, this is not hard to figure out.
Yeah.
It's not hard to figure out. Who else has a question? Yes.
So and you said it earlier, but I think if you're of the notion that you want to save the edifice, you want to save this building and the four walls and the roof, then you're not opposed to everything else that needs to happen. So we want to have the best for seniors, the best for the kids, the best, the biggest and best. Just because because you want to save this building doesn't mean that you don't want all of those things. And I think if you read Matt Conti's website, there started to become, you know, if you want this, then you don't want that. And that's, we can have both. I think, you know, Jason wrote a good comment on it. Jason Aluya wrote a good comment where he said, you can have both. It's going to take maybe some thinking outside the box a little bit. And what you,
money.
Yeah, and a lot of money, sure. And what you said earlier where, you know, maybe you start construction on something different and have that under construction while you're still have this as a viable place. But we shouldn't be pitting each other to say, against each other to say, you know, well, you're against it because you want it, you're against what the kids want because you want this building to stay as it is. So, you know, we can have both, and frankly, the neighborhood deserves both. I mean, they lost the CC Center, they've lost the North End Union, you know, so.
What did they do in 1985? You said they redesigned this. Did all the programs stop in 1985?
Who was here? Who knows?
They didn't have many programs then.
Yeah, we had the red phone.
We had, they had other, not then Union.
We had nothing new.
Right, they had programs in all those
I mean, I
places.
guess my point is, there's no need to reinvent the wheel. I'm sure other places have done this. What we can,
Right.
you know, we're not at that point, but I'm sure you could come up with other
Just one point
options.
about what this woman said about the senior citizens. If you put a center down on the waterfront, I mean, you can't expect people that live down on North Street, at the country, to walk all the way down there, especially in the winter. Night like tonight, you'll freeze down there. I mean, and it's dangerous crossing Commercial Street and that stupid bike path. But the thing is, the location, this is the perfect location. It's here, it's already here.
And that's why they
It's
put
the
it
center of the North
down,
End, just about.
because it's central.
Right.
It's not as much as a question, but maybe a suggestion. Marie, you mentioned something about the community thing. I mean, we all need to stick together on this. There's been a lot of division going on. We do all want, I mean, that should be the statement, is that we shall stick together with the statement is that we do need that big, brand new center that we talked about the meeting to have all the programs. But this is a great focal point, this building, because, you know, we all said we had the CC Center, you know, I was part of all that as a kid. And this is great if you add, if you make it a nice daycare, which we don't have, a nice elderly center, which we don't have. You know what I mean? We are crying for space for kids. Giving a new center all that space for kids and like dividing and giving this building use will help us also get usage for more kids. But the thing is that we're all divided. We are split. No, everybody said we want a new building, forget this building.
No, I never said that. I never said that.
No, I'm not saying you guys.
No, I know.
Everybody here is, you know, on the same page, but we read columns and talk to other people in the street, you know. We have to find a way to get everybody back together and say, hey, let's come up with some ideas.
That's right.
That's where it starts with. Hey, let's come up with some ideas. Let's talk to people, you know, with funds and stuff like that. Let's see what sticks.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That's why
If
I
we
said,
just
you
keep
know,
on talking about one building, you know, let's try and see how we can keep both.
But,
Because we're running out of space. I mean, when we had CC Center, when we had this place,
Oh, they
it
took
was
it all away.
good. You know, we had places to go and stuff to do. You know what I mean? If we have just one building, that's great. But those buildings, what they're looking at right now, are also going to be on the other edge. It's going to hurt the senior citizens. We did talk about that. You know, we talked about that. So I mean, Marie, we could find a way just to present something. You have to put stuff on paper. Present something. Have something written down. And we could talk about this to a blue in the face.
Right.
If we have something to present, that would be good.
Okay.
I understand they need this a lot for the young kids and so forth, after-school programs, so forth and so forth, which is great. And don't forget, there is the Neighborhood Service Center up on, you know, St. Michelangelo's old school, and that does cover some of the stuff for the elderly. So you should work with them also and find out what programs and see what could overlap. Don't forget that that exists in the North End. It's used North End, West End, but it's a place where the elderly go for food and assistance and all kinds of things. And they have the social workers. So that's an important source that you should coordinate with.
Thank you.
I'm kind of with the young guy over there. To me, the discussion is what's the best way to find the best solution for a community center? And that may or may not include this. And my fear is that if we lock ourselves into a historical designation, we may have an unintended consequence. And you're right. the right answer is probably a hybrid. And for me, it's Fulton Street and this.
Right.
But if you lock this into something that it's not, or that won't fit going forward, you may have cornered yourself. I think the conversation is what's the best solution and the best strategy for community center. Elderly, kids, basketball, whatever the case may be, and if we figure that out, then we can figure out, is it Fulton Street, is it this, is it a combination? I think the waterfront doesn't make sense.
No.
But that to me is where the conversation needs to go, and not Save Nazzaro, it's Save North End Community Center.
The question is, we can come up with ideas all day long of how to save both, but you have to be invited to the table of the people that make the decisions to be able to save it.
But that's part,
I guess my question is, what is the obligation of the city to discuss with the community what their plans are, and then how does the community then weigh into those decisions and have a seat at the table?
There is a line item to explore, you know, who the developer will be for this new community center. They've already gone through the preliminary step and eliminated 3 sites, well, really 4 sites, because they said this one is off the table.
Right.
That left 2 on the waterfront and took off Fulton Street. My suggestion would be that that line item, you know, be redesignated as, let's go back to the drawing board. And is it one center that the community wants? What is it that the community wants? The community sounds like from October's meeting and this meeting tonight that we're open to more ideas, different ideas, thinking a little bit more out of the box and not taking away. Certainly, we've identified that there is a need, a great need, for more space for the young people and for a full basketball court. That's a given. It doesn't mean that everything else has to be sacrificed to achieve that goal. So it just seems that sort of, you know, the cart put in front of the horse kind of thing. And I think the city needs to take a step back and say, maybe that money, we better hold off on that line item and say, what was it? I forget how much money it was.
$3 million. We have $3 million.
$3 million for a developer when we don't even know what we want to develop.
Well, it's not for a developer. So just to clarify a couple of things, I'm also going to pass out, this is hot off the press, this is a letter from Mayor Martin J. Walsh, setting the record straight on the Nazzaro Community Center and the study overall. So I brought about 50. If I missed anyone, it will be on North End Waterfront at some point, hopefully tonight.
It's already up there.
It's already up?
It's already up, yeah.
It's already up. See, the best, man, the best. Okay, and so, just to start, a couple of things. This is the beginning of the process, and so the study, and what the study, the North End Community Center study, the $100,000 that was in our capital budget, was to look at usage. So, we formed a community advisory committee. We asked stakeholders who use this center daily, weekly, and monthly to kind of put their heads together and say, how do you guys use the center now? Okay, my kid goes to after school, my kid goes to summer camp. We had a teenager on it who uses the center daily. We had people from a neighborhood group who use the center monthly. We had seniors who use the center bi-weekly. How do you use it now? If we could, you know, dream the biggest dream and draw a blank community center, what would you want to see in it? And so we heard lots of things. We heard that, you know, there's no theater in the center, so kids are practicing theater and dance in the hallway. That's inadequate. There's no multi-purpose fitness room, so you can't do yoga classes and Zumba classes because there's nowhere to do it. The seniors don't have their own designated space, so they play bingo here on Tuesdays. If there's a meeting Tuesday night, the chairs are disheveled, and by the time they come back, they spend the first half hour of their day reassembling everything. So they don't have a space just for seniors. So these are all the wants from the community. We put out surveys online, and we had a couple of think tank meetings, and these are some of the ideas that have come in.
Maria, just not to be rude, but could you tell people how many people were actually able to do that survey online? Because most of us were unable to do it. And I think there were, when they, at the meeting in October,
I have the number,
like
not off the top of my head.
12 people?
No, not total.
12 people on the
I think we got-
community, 12 people on the committee, and not very many responded to that.
To the survey, I
Maria,
don't have it off
I
the top
also
of my head.
handed them out, Maria, as well.
Yeah, so we had some available at the center as well. But that's what the study was. So now, from all that feedback and solicitation, the designer, Sasaki, took that all in and started to look at different sites for a possibility of a new community center. First off, there's no money to build this community center right now. We have not allocated any funds towards this. There is no money being sold to a developer for this building. There's no developer picked. This is all further down the line. What we're talking about right now is Sasaki takes all this information and they bring up a couple of sites. So they brought 6 sites to that meeting that they narrowed down to. Yeah.
Maria, I have a quick question.
Sure.
How did we jump from people wanting new programs to having to build a whole new site for it?
Well, so the site was deemed inadequate. So this center is 20,000 square feet.
28,000.
Okay. And then with the ideal programming, so with things like a full-size basketball court, multi-purpose rooms, a new workout facility, senior center, meeting space, this architects deemed that 41,000 was like the minimum required, and so that's already double the size of this building.
And then for the survey, did you also ask the people that wanted these new programs if they were willing to not have it housed in the center of the North End?
No, we were just doing blank slate overall. What would you like to see if we could build a new community center? And so from there, they took that back, made up some renderings, and narrowed down some sites that we believed were good options. This does not discredit any other site. So the 3 sites that they presented were the Marabella Pool site, this site itself, and the Sergeant's Wharf site. This doesn't mean that Fulton Street is off the table. This doesn't mean that we can't think of a new site, you know, another city-owned site, land that we own, to come up with this, but we would like to build it on a parcel that we own, obviously, because real estate is very expensive in this neighborhood. And the more cost we have just to acquire land, the more cost we have to build from scratch. And so building it on a city-owned parcel would make the most sense. So now, here we are, and we're still soliciting feedback. So those surveys, obviously you can't click on the paper of the article, but if you go on Matt's website, those will be live. These links are still active. We're still soliciting feedback. The designer is taking all of this information in currently and working with the Public Facilities Department to, you know, ask what the community wants and what different ideas. So when we
Can I
talk
ask you
about,
another question?
yeah,
Are we paying the designer? Is the city paying
yep,
the
there
designer?
was $100,000 allocated to the fund from the capital budget.
For the designer?
Yeah, just for the study. So we pay for the study. So the study starts, they create a program, things like the surveys and the meetings, everything like that comes into effect, and then they hand us a study and say, this is the Nazzaro Center community study.
But as one center, not considering the option of if you already have 28,000 square feet and you need 40, then you don't need 40,000 square feet, you only need an additional 12,000 square feet.
It's not into, like, so it's not that specific, I would say.
But it wasn't an option is my point.
Well, it wasn't posed as an option because we're taking all feedback and then they're going to say, this is the ideal recommended site. It doesn't specify you need 2 sites, it doesn't specify we only need 1. It's saying this is the minimum required for the amount of enrollment that they have in the programs, the amount of sports and different rooms and things that people had asked for.
They track everybody that comes through this building on an annual basis, on a daily basis. And they get the numbers, and they do that by the footage of the people square foot that's being utilized in the whole facility. And that's where they come up with the numbers of who's using what part of the building, what time of the day, what age group. That's what everybody signs into this building. That's where they come up with the numbers.
But the hope is to grow the program,
Exactly.
right?
We want the building to be as big as possible.
So the numbers that they come up with are they also gonna come up with numbers for the future hope of being able
Exactly,
to
so
take
we're
more
making
people
it
in?
bigger, we're making it as big as we want it to be, but we'd like it to be as big as possible, because what we're working with right now is already too small and they're already capacity. So we wanna make sure that if in 28,000 square feet, we can still do all this, but in a center twice the size, we could add more kids, there'd be no more
And
waiting
do we
lists, there'd be more
have,
programs.
do we have statistics around the areas in which we're lacking now? Things like kids that need to be turned away that can't come to the programs because of the size of the
Yeah.
building. Things like programs that can't start because of the funds that we don't have to be able to start them. Things like, I don't know, I heard like computer programs and different things like
Yeah,
that.
BCYF does have that, I can get that information for you, those specifics, and on the study, like the last presentation, it goes through some of those like items and.
And so I guess my last question, sorry to dominate, but I guess my last question is, if the mayor has already allocated $100,000 for a designer to be able to do this study and figure out where it would go,
$3
I
million
guess.
for the site study.
No, that's for the design, Alan. So the study, $100,000 was for this, so this is paying for what we've done so far, and then when we
Yeah.
get our final product.
So I guess my assumption would be, despite, and I appreciate you saying that it's only so far in the process,
Right.
but my assumption would be is this is a process that's happening.
It
Because
is.
if he's
It's
gonna
the beginning.
allocate money to it, then he has some sort of investment to move forward with something eventually.
It is the beginning of the process, but the Public Facilities Department could take this study, and we spent $100,000 on it, and they could take this study and say, you know what? It's not feasible, we don't have the land, we don't have enough money to allocate right now, and we might need to allocate maybe a different set of breaks, and we need to do an emergency repair in another neighborhood. And they're gonna say, you know what, we're gonna hold off on this, and they could walk away. So this isn't, like, building a new community center is not set in stone, and so that's what the study is looking towards, the feasibility of building one, and what would actually go into it, and how much we think it would cost.
Have
and
other
where we could
places
fund
done
it.
this? Have like other spots in the city
Yeah,
done this?
we reopened the Monte Pino Center in East Boston recently. Other BCYFs have gone through like major renovations or total moves. And so this
So you can
is
get
part
the
of this is
information
part
from
of a
that one
process
too.
across the city.
So you can get that
Let's get another
information too though?
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask Maria something. Maria, I hope you will consider this feedback. And I also would like to ask you to invite us to speak to the group that you've been meeting with for over a year.
So we've
about-
only had 3 meetings and those were advertised.
I'm asking if we could present together, Marie, Kirsten, others, the idea of 2 locations, because we have not heard that that's an option, and we heard on October 17 that people were interested in that. And that is in fact what we've been spending a lot of our own time, when we could have been doing something else, trying to develop, because we didn't hear that option from Sasaki. We haven't heard that from any of the officials that I've been meeting with one-on-one. In fact, we've had trouble getting meetings with a lot of our officials, as you know. So we love the feedback that it's not a decision yet. We love the feedback that you're open. But the problem is, we don't know where, you're asking where do we go from here? We keep organizing. We keep getting signatures because we don't have any other power. We don't have the influence of your group that's deciding and is going to recommend to the mayor, and that has a $3 million line item for design and siting of the new center. We don't even know where it came from, that it all has to be in one building. So that decision seemed to have been made before we even had a chance to know about it. So forgive me if I'm a little energized on this, but we would love to have the community's voice, not just your hand-picked group of 12 people. So how can we go forward together and make a win-win that makes this community come together, as you suggested? Where's that young man who was here? How can we come together on this? Because I don't think we're that far apart, to tell you the truth. And I think the North End puts in enough tax money that we deserve for the city to give us a little bit back for our seniors and our kids. And the legacy, I mean, I know, Paul, you weren't in love with this building the way some of us are, but
It's not a matter of being in love with the building.
I'm gonna finish.
This is not about saving the Nazzaro Center for me. It's about
I know it's not
the
for
community
you,
center.
But for some of our people who signed this thing, it does matter. They care about the legacy and culture that this building represents. So it's not just one issue. I'm going to stop talking because I've talked too much.
Looks like Kathy has a question.
Kathy had a question, and then we're
Wait,
going
I'm
to
going to Ellen.
I was just going to say, Maria, since the study is being done and there's allocations paid for it, And since it sounds like the study is being done to look for the perfect location to house everything, isn't this a good time to tell the people who are doing the study, could you also look at an option of doing, of finding the 40,000 or whatever square feet in between the Nazzaro Center and a second site? I mean, if they're doing the study anyway, and enough people in the community are interested in saving the Nazzaro Center and keeping this part of the community programs, you know, let's tell them that, like, this is something the community wants.
We want all feedback, so there's,
Well, they got that feedback at the October.
yeah, we got that feedback at the meeting, and those links are still live, so please, like, if you haven't wrote a comment yet, wait, oh, can I, sorry. Yep, it's on there, but it'll be on Matt's website too, there's a couple of them, it might not come up, but if you go to boston.gov, and then you search on the city's website, Nazzaro, the Nazzaro Center community page will come up through BCYF, and there's a whole section called Nazzaro Center, Nazzaro Community Center Study. The 2 links for those surveys are on there, so please, like, we're asking for your feedback.
I'll send it over.
Yep, and I can send it to Cheryl too. But then just to go back to Ellen quick, Ellen, what we want to do is we want to work with the community. We want the community's voice to be heard. Like, this is a public process, and it'll be a public process the entire way through. So if the Public Facilities Department takes this study, when the study is complete, because it's still not complete, because we're still, like I said, soliciting feedback, when the study is complete, if they decide that they want to further, like, investigate further, look into this stuff, like designing a new community center, that's a public process. And so we'll start day 1 in this room, most likely, and start asking people for more feedback on design and location and site selection and all of those things. And that hasn't happened yet because we haven't even designated the fact that we are definitely going to build a community center. That's why this was a study to see if it's feasible, and a study to see if we want to do it and want to put a lot of money. This is going to cost a lot of money. A brand new community center is not cheap. And so if we're going to put all this investment in, you know, we need a little bit of help just to stop and then come back to the community and go through the process for that. And then a couple of other things though I just want to touch on because it's coming back in my mind. This building, so if now we're talking and, you know, if we go through a design and we pick a different site and we pick, and all of that, if we were going to sell this building, number 1, since it's over 50 years old, it's automatically registered for landmarks review. So the Landmarks Commission would have to review it because it's older than 50 years old. And number 2, anytime the city sells a piece of public property, it does go through an RFP, so a request for proposal, which is written by a city department based on who owns it. So it could be BCYF, it could be the Department of Neighborhood Development. And through the request for proposal, they could ask for very specific uses. We just had a meeting a couple of weeks ago about there's a small building on Tileston Street that was left in excess from the Elliott School. The Elliott School rebuild on Salem, and so now the Department of Neighborhood Development owns it. And so the first thing they did was to solicit ideas for the RFP. So they came out, we had a meeting with the abutters, and they said, what would you like to see in this site? Because you can write an RFP very specifically, and you can ask for things like community uses, you can ask for things like affordable housing, you can ask for elderly housing. And these are all things that the city would take into account while writing a request for proposal. And then if developers or CDCs or other community type centers were to apply for that, they would have to meet those criteria. So this would not be, you know, one day we are here and we're just going to sell it to the biggest developer and we're going to walk away. Also, when it comes to building over Polcari Playground, Boston Centers for Youth and Families owns this building and this building only. As soon as you step outside, you're in the Boston Parks Department's playground. To build over a playground, you need to pass legislation through Article 97 of the Massachusetts State Constitution, which is building on top of a parkland. This is not an easy task. This is not a rubber stamp kind of board. This is a very long and strenuous process. And honestly, building over a parkland is something that the city is not keen on doing, especially in dense neighborhoods like the North End, where our open space is already so limited.
So would that discount the location down in the Arabella Pool? Correct. Because that's a park.
Yep. Well, it is a park, but Boston Centers for Youth and Families owns everything from the pool up. So the spray pool, BCYF owns. But once that fence hits for the baseball field, that's Boston Park. So there's 2 different city agencies that own parcels on that one lot.
Bureaucratic stuff.
I know, it's very, and then, oh, and just to touch base on the Coast Guard base issue, we, so I actually coach basketball. We've reached out to the Coast Guard numerous times to try to get some time. In that gym, it's very hard because after 9/11, you have to have identification just to enter the building. So we would have to, they said it's just not possible to have kids running in and out and holding practice without proper registration. It wasn't big enough.
We could add on the
Is it
top.
possible to get Ellen to meet with Susanna?
Like that, we can even try to have everyone come back out, like, you know, before, I'm not gonna promise before the study's over, but definitely to present the final study.
It would be nice if they could be before they do the study. I think that people just want us to.
Right, I just wanna make sure everybody knows that this building is not up for sale. And so I understand and I admire Ellen and Kirsten's, you know, efforts for historic preservation. And personally, I think the outside of the building is beautiful and the history of the building itself is noteworthy, but just know that this building is not up for sale. And this is the beginning of a long process. And hopefully for the best outcome would be a nice new community center for the entire neighborhood.
Thank you.